Now, to clear up some misinformation about quoting. Most of you know that when you quote, it has to be verbatim. That means it has to be word for word exactly as it appears in the original. And often you will swipe whole segments from your website and just cut and paste them. And as long as you put quotation marks around them, you think it's good. But they are naked. And what do I mean by that? That means nobody wants to read quote after quote after quote after quote. When we ask you to write a paper, we expect you to do the writing and use the quotes only as support, which means you have to introduce it. And at the very least, you have to put a few words leading into your quote. For instance, and this is from the history of Northwood, I swiped a whole quote, and I at least put in, Northwood began when? On March 23rd, 1959, two young men with an idea, a goal, and a pragmatic philosophy to encompass it all broke away from their careers in a traditional, da-da-da-da-da. So I at least led into it to indicate why I put this quote in my paper. You cannot expect your reader to figure out what you drew from that quote. You must guide the reader, and I guided by at least putting in Northwood began, a cue as to why I put the quote in. And of course I still have to do my in-text citation down at the bottom, which would be about, no date. Now, there are better ways to write it though. So if the original is this, let's integrate the quote into my writing. So that's, in this case, I'm asking you to sum up a little bit of it before you plop in a quote. Here's an example. Northwood University began in 1959. I just summed it up. And instead of saying two young men, I went ahead and said their names, Dr. Arthur E. Turner and Dr. R. Gary Soffer. And then I picked up just part of a quote. So, in case you were wondering, you do not have to quote whole sentences. I can pick up any part of it and quote it. I still do my in-text citation. While we're at it, let me just show you some tricks so that you can adjust a quote. And I told you before, it had to be verbatim, exactly as it appears in the text, unless you use one of these two tricks. The first one is the beautiful ellipses. That's the dot, dot, dot. So if I want to skip over some detail that I don't think is pertinent or makes my point, I can use what I have in red here, dot, 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 which is called an ellipses. And it's still considered a verbatim quote, as long as I use my quotation marks, and I must use my in-text citation. What that tells my reader is, this is basically what it says, but I've skipped a few words, and the dot, dot, dots are the words I skipped. Another way, if it won't fit in my sentence grammatically correct, but I want to pick it up with the word create, and I'll just read this to you. Northwood University began in 1959 when Dr. Arthur E. Turner and Dr. R. Gary Soffer, and the original says, create a new concept. I need to change that word, then I can use the square brackets and show my reader that this is a quote. I just had to alter one word. And I changed it to created to make it grammatically correct with my sentence. Created a new concept in education. Still do my in-text citation. Where students get confused is on how to paraphrase and what paraphrase really is. So here's my original. And one thing you need to know is whether you paraphrase or whether you quote, it doesn't matter. You must put in-text citation there and say where you got the information. Even if you put the whole thing in your own words, it is still coming from another source. So the only thing that wouldn't get in-text citation would be your own opinion about what you read. Now this gets tricky because you've read a lot, and so now it feels like it's part of your own knowledge base. But if that information could not just come from you, if it's data of any sort, then it must have citation. So you'll have to find the original source and put your in-text citation there to verify it. Even if you had it in multiple sources, choose one and put it in as your citation for where you got that information. The other thing that's tricky is sometimes you think that the source will help you. And so you might change out just a word here or there and call it a good paraphrase. I've highlighted in blue the words that I switched out. So if I switch out objective for goal, that is not far enough away from the original to be considered a paraphrase, and you will get marked for plagiarism. Same with idea and notion, because look at my sentence. I still use the word visionary. They're visionary. I used become a reality instead of became a reality. I used enrolled 100 students. So I might as well go ahead and quote it and use my ellipses and use my other tricks of changing became into become to make this work. Another way we get in trouble is marked in red. If I swipe a whole word, this is a direct swiping, stealing from the original, pragmatic philosophy. Now, how do I know what I have to quote, and how do I know what's okay? Well, I don't have to quote things like people's names and, but, or words that we use all the time. I don't have to quote. It is unusual words. In other words, I don't run around saying pragmatic philosophy very often. So that stands out. And it's a red flag to any of your professors that you probably don't say that on a daily basis, and therefore it came from an original source and it should have been quoted. So, how do I go about, and this takes practice. Don't worry, you will practice and you'll get good at it. How do I do it? The best trick I know is look away from the original and then tell your reader what it basically says. So imagine yourself saying to a friend, oh, in this article I learned this, this, and this. Or here's the main point that I took away from this article. And that's how you write your paper, although you don't have to use I learned. You can just state it. Whether you quote or whether you paraphrase, though, you're still going to put that in text citation. Now, here's an example of how I would paraphrase. Truly look away and just sum up what I think this passage says. My two men started Northwood University in 1959 with the intention of offering practical skills for the next generation. That's what I think pragmatic philosophy means, and I read a little further and it talked about that. So I said practical skills for the next generation. They were looking to the future. And even though mine is so different from the original, I will do about, comma, and so that's a lot to take in. Let's sum it up right here, and this is printable. You know that your quotes have to be verbatim. You know that if you can't do them verbatim to make them fit in your sentence, you can adjust them with ellipses or those little square brackets. You know that you can't leave them naked. You have to introduce them somehow, and that it's better writing to integrate parts of quotes into your own sentence. You don't have to quote whole sentences. You know that quotes should be used sparingly. I'd much rather read you paraphrasing, or else I'd go to the original source and just read that. Paraphrasing, though, is more than changing the occasional word. You have to reinvent it. Just step away and you look for the key points. So I got a cute little phrase here for you. Look away for the takeaway. Both require in-text citation. If it didn't come from your own opinions, then you must put a page number, or not a page number, but a citation next to it. And I don't want you just plopping down dry information without summing it up as to why you put it in there.